Goodnight World is an anime that tricks us into thinking it's about a broken family, but it's actually about something much darker. There are moments in life when we realize that no matter how broken you feel, things could always be worse, because there are people who can't even be a family in the one place where it should come naturally reality. But what if that family could only exist inside a game? That is the question Goodnight World brings to us. At first glance, it seemed simple, a dysfunctional family that, by chance, reunites in a virtual reality. The expectation was clear: understand what drove them apart and watch how they rebuild themselves. But the anime isn't about that, or at least not entirely. And that's exactly where it starts to lose itself, or rather, where it becomes unique in its own way. Two quick things before we begin. First, this video contains spoilers, not about ending, but about moments and reveals that could change how you experience the story for the first time. If you haven't watched it yet, you might want to do that first. Second, everything here is based on anime adaptation. I've never read the original manga, so this is in a comparison and it is in a critique of the source material. Just an honest look at what anime is on its own terms. With that said, let's get into it. Chapter 1: Escaping Reality. Goodnight World begins with a family that has already stopped being a family. In the real world, the Arimas are just four people sharing the same space, yet living in completely different realities. The mother, Sayaka Arima, or Mei, as she is known in the virtual world of Planet, is an absent presence hiding in net cafes. She lives far away not only from her family but from herself. The father, Kojiro Arima, or Shiro in the game, is a programming genius, but his professional brilliance stands in stark contrast to his personal life. At home, he isn't respected. Pressure, anger, stress, and guilt make him unpredictable and at times cruel. He no longer knows how to control these emotions, creating a cycle of distance, fear, and resentment. And then there are the two brothers, the youngest nicknamed AAA or Asuma Arima, and our protagonist, the older brother Taicho, nicknamed Ichi. Both trapped between resentment and indifference. One rejects the real world entirely, the other tries to move forward but carries the weight of a family already in ruins. They don't understand each other, they don't connect, and deep down they seem to hate each other. But then there's the other world. In the virtual game Planet, they become something completely different. Without knowing who they really are, without names, past, or expectations, they find each other again as the Akabane family, a group feared, respected, but above all, united. Because these same four people who can barely coexist in the real world can trust, protect, and care for one another there, without knowing who they are, without realizing that they are already a family. And this raises an unavoidable question: what exists in that world that doesn't exist here? Is it the anonymity, absence of responsibilities, or the fact that in that space they don't carry the weight of who they are? To answer that, we need to look closer at what Planet actually is to them and what it reveals about who they become inside it. Chapter 2: The contrast between realities and the desire for the ideal self. Goodnight World isn't the first work to place a broken person inside a virtual world and ask, is this more real than their reality? Sword Art Online did it, Bell did it, Summer Wars did it, but what separates Goodnight World from these works is subtle, and it matters. In SAO, the virtual world starts as a trap and gradually becomes a home. The characters build genuine relationships there, but the story's moral is always pulling them back toward reality. The game world is meaningful, but ultimately secondary. In Bell, director Mamoru Hosoda goes further. The online persona, a pop star named Bell, becomes the space where the protagonist finds her voice. But even there, the film ends by suggesting that the digital self must be shed to reveal the real one underneath, as if the virtual was always just scaffolding. Goodnight World refuses both of those answers. Here, the virtual reality isn't a trap to escape from, and it isn't scaffolding to tear down. It's the only place where these four people have ever functioned as a family. The game Planet, an MMORPG with floating cities, impossible skies, and a legendary boss called the Black Bird of Happiness, it's not an escape from their lives. It is their lives, the one place where something real actually happens between them. And that changed everything. Carl Jung called the social mastery word to adapt or simply survive the persona. The problem begins when that mask becomes more real than ourselves. In the real world, the father is rigid, strict, consumed by his own expectations. He insults his children, demands perfection, and meets mistakes with yelling or physical punishment. For the protagonist, he stopped being a father figure long ago, but in the game, he becomes Shiro, calm, protective, almost the ideal leader he wished he could be. The mother, absent and fragmented, becomes Mei, present, empathetic, something close to the parent she never managed to be at home. And Ichi, the Shatin who calls real life crap, in Planet, he finally lives, without fear, without the pressure of a world he despises. He himself says it best, the real world is crap, and it's here in Planet that I intend to live and die. Without realizing it, he projects onto Shiro the father figure he never had, someone present, protective, someone who doesn't demand but supports. Donald Winnicott described this as the conflict between the true self and false self, where we build versions of ourselves to navigate the world, even if it takes us further from our authenticity. But here, the question gets uncomfortable. Which one is the false self? The cold, distant father in the real world, or the warm leader in the game? Young also spoke of the shadow, everything we repress, everything that doesn't fit the image we want to project. In real world, the shadow is heavy. It surfaces in trauma, silence, distance. In Planet, it's rewritten, or at least hidden behind a better version of themselves. And that leads to the question Goodnight World keeps circling without ever quite answering. Are we more real when no one knows who we are? Because anonymity offers something dangerous, freedom without responsibility. The Akabane family has one ironclad rule: never ask about each other's offline lives. And that rule is exactly what makes the family possible. The moment reality enters Planet, the family starts to crack, which brings us to the most important thing Planet actually does. Not as a game, but as a structure, and why, when it starts to bleed into reality, everything changes. Chapter 3. Planet. Planet isn't just a setting, it's a system built on a deeply human logic. If you remove history, remove expectation, remove the wave of who you were, what's left? What's left, apparently, is the capacity to love. This is what makes Planet so disturbing as a concept. It doesn't give the Arimas new personalities. It gives them permission to use the ones they already have but could never access at home. The father's protectiveness, the mother's warmth, the brother's loyalty. None of this is invented inside the game, it's unlocked, and the anime understands this. It uses Planet not just as a backdrop for battles and guild drama, but as a mirror. Every moment of connection inside the game exists in direct contrast with a moment of failure outside it. When Shiro defends Ichi in Planet, we cut to Kojiro ignoring his son in the hallway. The virtual and the real aren't parallel stories. They're the same story, told in two different languages. This is where Goodnight World owns its own place. Because SAO asks, can a virtual experience be as meaningful as a real one? Bell asks, can an online identity be as authentic as an offline one? And Goodnight World asks something harder. What happens when the virtual world is the only place a real relationship can exist at all? And it goes even further, because Planet wasn't just designed, it was built by Kojiro. The father who can't connect with his children in reality constructed a world where they finally connect. There's something almost tragic in that detail. He built the space for warmth he couldn't provide in person. He gave his family a home inside a machine. The anime even pushes this into science fiction territory. The Black Bird isn't just a game boss, it becomes a virus. Artificial intelligences based on real human memories start bleeding into the physical world. The line between what is simulated and what is real doesn't just blur, it breaks. And when it breaks, the family is forced to confront everything the anonymity of Planet had been protecting them from. Which is the point, because Planet isn't just a place they escape to. It's the pressure valve on a family that was about to explode. And the question Goodnight World raises and doesn't fully answer is whether that valve was saving them or just delaying the inevitable. Now, the visual language of the anime makes all of this felt before it's understood, and that's where the aesthetics become something more than style. Chapter 4. Aesthetics and contrast between emptiness and intention. Visually, Goodnight World feels inconsistent, but that inconsistency isn't entirely a flaw. It's something you feel. The character design is expressive and stylized. The eyes especially convey fatigue, distance, and disconnection, as if the characters themselves are absent from who they are. But when the camera pulls back, the background starts to fail. Empty environment, under-detailed spaces, a certain stiffness in the animation that reveals production limitations. Here is where the analysis gets interesting. Part of this is not just a flaw, it's a choice. The real world is heavy, gray, cold, tight framing, cramped spaces, visual barriers, doors, walls, screens, trapping the characters. A constant sense of confinement, not physical but emotional. Then we enter Planet, and everything changes. Vibrant, colorful, expansive. The environments open up. Colors explode, the camera gains freedom, the animation itself becomes more fluid. The avatars, ironically, feel more human than the real-life versions. This mirrors what Osoda did intentionally in Bell, hand-drawn 2D for reality, purely CG for the virtual world, to signal that these are two genuinely different modes of existence. Goodnight World does something similar, if less technically refined. The visual grammar changes when you step through the headset. Real world equals constriction, Planet equals expansion. But where Goodnight World diverges from Bell is in what that expansion means. In Bell, the digital world is beautiful but ultimately false. It has to be left behind. In Goodnight World, the digital world is where the truth lives. The warmth you see in Planet isn't illusion. It is the only genuine version of warmth these characters have ever shown each other. So the visual contrast isn't saying, look how much better the fantasy is. It's saying, look how much of themselves they had to hide to survive reality. The environment mirrors the inner state. The real world doesn't feel empty because it lacks detail. It feels empty because the characters are empty. Meanwhile, Planet is idealized, more intense, more beautiful, more meaningful, because that's how they experience it. It's not wish fulfillment, it's emotional truth rendered as landscape. And this is what the anime does best. Even when the animation stutters, when it works, the visuals aren't decorating the story, they are the story. But the story also has a problem because all of this, the contrast, the depth, the potential, runs directly into the question of whether the execution can hold it together. And that's how we arrive in Chapter 5. Expectations versus reality. This is where Goodnight World had potential to be incredible, but it chose to be different. It's not that the anime is bad, it is that it fails to tell the best version of the story it had in its hands. Not for the lack of potential, but because of pacing. Because the themes it aims to explore, family, identity, escape, forgiveness, were never the final destination, they were the foundation. And at a certain point, the narrative drifts away from the emotional core of the family and shifts toward artificial intelligence, a virus bleeding from the game into the physical world, external conflicts, even brain death. What once seemed like an intimate drama becomes a fictional thriller with touches of horror. That shift isn't necessarily wrong, but it breaks what made the work special: emotional connection, intimacy, human conflict. The elements were there, the potential was there, but the story had 12 episodes to do what should have taken 25. Important moments passed too quickly. Conflicts that should leave a mark rarely happened. The family reconciliation, which had the entire series built toward, arrives too fast to feel earned. Still, even with accelerated pacing, the work manages something worth noting: character motivations. Even when presented quickly, we understand why each person acts the way they do, their traumas, their flaws, their imperfect attempts to connect. And maybe that's what's most frustrating, because the pieces were in place. The anime doesn't fail for lack of ambition, it fails for not giving its ambition the time it needed. And this leaves a very specific feeling, not disappointment in something bad, but the particular unease of seeing clearly what it could have been, which maybe isn't so different from how the characters themselves feel about their own lives. Between what it is and what could have been, Goodnight World is not a bad anime, but perhaps that was never the problem. It carries an incredibly strong premise, a broken family that can only be whole in a world built on forgetting who they are. It asks genuine questions about identity, about validity of a virtual connection, about whether a relationship built on anonymity can still be called real. And it answers some of them, just not all of them, and not slowly enough. In philosophy, Sartre described human existence as a constant tension between what we are and what we project ourselves to be, a gap we can never fully close. Goodnight World ends up reflecting exactly that, not just in its characters, but in the work itself. It exists in the space between what it is and what it could have been, and maybe that's why it leaves a mark, not for perfection, but for the unease it creates. Because even incomplete, it touches something real, the need to start over as someone different, somewhere no one knows your name. The Kabane family's one rule, don't ask about the real world, is also the condition for their love, and the tragedy is that once the rule breaks, they have to learn to love each other without it. Whether they succeed is something the anime rushes past, but the question it leaves behind, that stays. If this idea captures your attention, it's worth watching, because sometimes even an imperfect story can do something rare. It makes you think, and in the end, maybe that's what really matters. If you enjoy this kind of reflective and artistic analysis, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, do you think we are more real in reality or behind the screen?